Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to wait a few minutes. We have a number of people that are just joining, so stay tuned, grab a coffee. We'll be back in a few minutes. I think we'll get going. Welcome, everyone. This is the Creative Technology and Design and Epicor webinar, Gears, Handshakes, and Sparks. We'll be looking at the factory floor utilizing Epicor's AI solution, Prism. And with that, I would like to introduce our main speaker. Connor Hyder is a solution engineer with Epicor. He's got great experience with Prism in AI from an industry perspective. He'll be sharing a lot of insights with you this morning. Feel free to use the chat to post any questions. And we'll have time at the end if we don't get to your question during the actual session. A little about Creative. We are an exclusive Epicor solution provider. We focus on manufacturing technology. Epicor is our main platform, and we're delighted to introduce the concept of AI leveraging the Kinetic platform. A lot of our customers have been asking and wanting to better learn and understand how AI can help and improve manufacturing operations, technology, and utilization within their organization to make better informed decisions. Hopefully in the next hour, you'll learn some of that, and it will probably provide a platform for you to ask additional questions. So don't hesitate, reach out to your contacts at Creative. We'll be more than happy to help you understand how to better leverage the Prism platform inside the Kinetic platform. So before I turn it over to Connor, I'm going to just remind everyone that we do have Safe Harbor. So you're going to hear, you're going to see, and you're going to discuss a lot of topics that may or may not be available today. Some of that might change. So all that's protected in our Safe Harbor statement. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Connor. We might limit or minimize our video for this part of the presentation so that we can optimize bandwidth so you can get a true experience of the Kinetic capability. Thank you.
All right, Bob. Appreciate that introduction and appreciate you having me on this webinar with Creative, right? One of our best partners, and I'm excited to talk about Prism with everybody today. As he said, please feel free to put questions in the chat. If we're lucky, we're going to get to the end. We're going to have a little bit of time to be able to address some of those while we're live here. Otherwise, we may follow up in the chat afterwards as best as we can to address those types of questions. So, Gears, Handshakes, and Sparks, right? The title of today's webinar. What does that mean? Well, I can kind of break that down, right? That's some terminology we've been using in terms of the evolution of our ERP in general, right? When we talk about Gears, we mean the machine-to-machine interactions that create data flows. We mean the ways, handshakes, that humans interact with technology using more natural language inputs. And Sparks, those are the insights that are served up, even without the question being asked, to empower users, right? And that's really a philosophy around the direction that we want to move, right, with the ERP. And Prism is the tool that we're using to leverage that. Now, as a solution engineer at Epicor, I spend probably 90% of my time working directly with customers, addressing challenges, getting on the shop floor, understanding how you folks work from a day-to-day perspective, and trying to align the solutions that we have, right, with what you're needing to accomplish in your business. And I'm lucky enough to have been, a little bit of an SME, I guess you could say, with Prism and be a part of that evolution. And I'm really excited to introduce this to you folks today. I'm sure some folks have already heard about it. But in what I normally do is I demonstrate in software. So I promise you, we are going to get to software, but I found it very effective to move through a few slides that I've prepared for today's presentation to give some background on Prism and what really sets this apart, right, and differentiates it from other solutions that are out in the market that I'm sure people have even played with. So one of the things that we're seeing, right, is that it's a cloud-first foundation with Prism. Data structure, security, model agnostic. It's really focused on that user, that customer first experience. And I'll start to break that down in a few minutes here. But I always like to kind of preface things because we've been a manufacturing, right? Make, move, and sell. Manufacturing, distribution, automotive, right? All the various verticals, and Prism applies throughout. We've always been in these industries, and we're known for providing those solutions in that ERP format. I think what a lot of people sometimes don't realize is that we've actually been in the machine learning, or what we're now calling AI, right, which has machine learning underpinnings. We've been in that industry for years, over a decade. Products that we already have that you've already used have been influenced by machine learning, such as Epicor content management and intelligent data capture, right? If we think about durable algorithmic solutions just in general, if you're leveraging MRP, that's a very intelligent solution already, right? So this is not our first foray into AI, but Prism is really the evolution and keeping pace with the solutions that you may have seen out at the consumer grade in the market. And how can we integrate those types of natural experiences inside the ERP to empower you? So I'm going to go ahead and move on from this one because there's a particular slide that I really like to get to. And I want to remind everyone before I start breaking Prism down, I've said it before, right? Epicor, make, move, sell. We have those vertical industry specific ERPs, Gears, Handshakes, and Sparks. We want to enable things like those machine to machine interactions. You're probably going to hear me bring up solutions that may not be AI today, right? But are serving as the fundamental underpinnings of where the information lives, or the substrate, right, of knowledge and context, which really does start with your ERP. But if you have used Grow Business Intelligence, right, there's another avenue and solution that's out there for folks to be accessing and be more prepared as well for AI, because we're going to be integrating AI into those things as well. So if I move one more slide forward, this is the part where I get excited, I nerd out a little bit, and I have to give props to the product director of AI at Epicor, Michael Atkinson, because I did steal this slide from him. I'm like, this is amazing. And when I say nerd out, I've spent really 15 years of most of my professional career on your folks' side of the fence as an IT director and someone doing plant floor automation and ERP implementation. So I've seen a lot of software. I've put it in place. And when I got to this information, I'm like, hey, I need to be able to share this with people. And that's why I brought it here today for you folks. And so when we talk about Prism, and that's why I like to go through this, is I want to set expectations and I want to give that background. When we talk about Prism, it's not just an AI wrapper. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that term before. I bring it up. That's when someone says, hey, I did something with ChatGPT and I put a little front end in front of it, right? That's not always going to lead to an enterprise grade solution. And that's certainly not the path that we took with Prism. We wanted to make an enterprise grade solution. And what do I mean by that? Well, that's what I'll start breaking down here. But if you look at the box on the screen, this Prism orchestration layer is what I've kind of coined it for myself. This is truly what the underpinnings of Prism is. This is the solution that we've created that is embedded in the ERP. And I assure you folks, I am not trying to make a quiz at the end of this or anything for you, but I feel like it's really good background to have because it can assure you of the direction and how we're handling and developing this further, right? And give you some insight into some of those enterprise grade technologies. So let's move a little bit forward and actually start breaking down what these pieces are. With Prism, everything starts at the front end, that user question on ERP data, right? It's kind of exactly what we've all wished we could get for a long time. And there are certainly great tools already inside of our systems for accessing information. But I think the key differentiator here and what we've seen in the market at large and what folks have already played with, I'm sure people have picked up ChatGPT or Copilot or others, is that natural language interface. And it's not just, defining it in that technical term. It's a natural language interface or just a user interface that's natural to everyone. And so I like to say that that is a consumer grade type of experience that you're getting in those apps. And well, guess what? We're creating that consumer grade experience here. I don't mean that in the sense of it's anything less than enterprise. What I mean is it's a familiar way of interacting, right, with AI solutions. So I'll show that when we get to the demonstration portion of what I mean, but I think what I eventually get to in software, you're going to probably be expecting a chat interface, a place we can ask questions, voice input, all of those types of things. So we've got that familiar user experience. So let's go ahead and move to that orchestration layer. This is the part where the Epicor technology stack, the underpinnings of Prism that runs and delivers those results to users. Now I'm going to move over to the LLM side. I'm still kind of walking around right now, but it's an important distinction and an important call out that I'm making here. And Prism is model agnostic, which again, I'm a little bit more techie, but I think this is a really cool thing from an enterprise perspective. This means that it's not a wrapper. It's not just something that's snapped in. We're not feeding data directly to an LLM or only one LLM. We can actually leverage different large language models, different AI solutions, right, that help fulfill these requests on the back end. That means that we're not kind of tied to the performance of various or different LLM models that are out there, right? We can switch that when we need to. We can service different requests, right, with different models if we need to. And you, as the users, and in terms of having a good user experience, you don't have to be aware of that. That's really for us in our tech stack as a SaaS provider to really just provide the best AI-driven, Prism-driven results, right, to you. And we handle and manage those types of performant activities with various models. We go inside of that orchestration layer now. We're looking at ERP security. I will probably hit on this, more than once, or I'll spend a bit of time talking about it too right here. But I think this is a very, very fundamental piece of what makes Prism an enterprise level solution, right? We didn't want to deliver something that immediately wiped away, years of work that you've put into tuning your systems, your security, your user access rights, what information people should be able to access, and not have Prism respect that. So the security part of Prism in that orchestration layer is how we get Prism to actually understand the various user roles, rights, and access controls that you've already set up in Epicor and be able to respect that in terms of delivering answers to those users, okay, to make sure that we're not inadvertently placing data maybe that they shouldn't have access to in their hands. And we're doing that in a very important way to ensure that you folks, right, are able to leverage AI securely. But again, it's part of that orchestration layer, so it's yet something else that you don't have to manage. So why spend so much time discussing that? I have gotten the question before, so I'm kind of, I'm throwing one out there for myself to catch right here. I have gotten responses before of people saying, well, Connor, I could go out, right, and get a Chat GPT subscription, and I could maybe start hooking it up through Automation Studio and doing some things with it. Hey, not a bad idea, and you're still leveraging Epicor tools to do that, but it's severely limiting because now you're creating things on a case-by-case basis, and also things that don't naturally potentially respect, right, the user rights, security, and access to information that should be respected. So we simplify your deployment experience in being able to do that as an out-of-the-box feature. Then I'm going to move over to Epicor embeddings and per customer embeddings. It's not something that I think most people are usually thinking about when they're thinking about AI solutions, is even the term embeddings. But if you think of all the language and components and pieces that LLMs have to understand and interpret from both the user's requests for information or answers or insights, as well as the information that LLMs already have as part of their base training, right? Embeddings become an important feature to drive better, more consistent answers. And essentially what that does is that gives us ways of really honing in from specific questions, about jobs. Well, that means things like jobs and demands and materials and engineering and operations, right? And so embeddings is a way for us to help assist translating those answers, those questions that your users are asking, into a format that LLMs better understand, to also better understand how to drive those results and what tools to even use to get those results to you. So moving on over here, the LLMs in the background behind Prism, right? They don't actually have to go and crunch through your data every single time. And this is important. We don't want to feed your data to LLMs. So if you notice where the lines are going in this orchestration layer that I've been describing here, is ERP data doesn't have a line that shoots straight up to LLMs, right? Why? Well, the orchestration layer and how we've actually used those embeddings and how we've actually structured this is really quite interesting, in that we have taught the LLMs, right, and use the tools that we have in our Prism orchestration layer on how to be able to utilize the various tool sets that exist inside of the ERP system already. You'll notice as I get into the demo phase that answers that are generated look a lot like BAQs. Some of them have nice graphical outputs, which guess what, is using another ERP tool set, right? Some dig into ECM. But that's because the LLMs are actually directed on how to utilize those tools to return very precise results that are actually your data and not interpretations of your data, which is another very important distinction to make. We're going to continue on here to the agents. Now, if anyone has kind of heard about Prism or read up on it, you might hear that agent term. For us, when we talk about agents, we talk about actually different fundamental tools and ways that Prism can work through various questions and scenarios that a user is presenting to it. So the way I kind of break this down, and I have another slide that will show this too, is if you think about, I'm asking maybe about some, job materials or late orders. That's going to be one kind of workflow, one way that we've trained an LLM to go and retrieve and return those results, versus maybe asking questions about a document that you might have in Epicor content management. That would be a different agent that's actually going and retrieving that. Because guess what? Just like as you use those tools, the AI having to use those tools to generate those types of results is going to also be a little bit different. And I told you no quizzes either, and that is also applicable to the user experience, is you don't necessarily have to know what all of these agents are in the background to be able to get those types of answers from the various agents. There's selections that happen in the background to best guide Prism and how it's going to go and get those results retrieved. So overall, right, we're leveraging that industry leading data model. Okay, LLMs is what's driving that Prism orchestration layer and using those tools, but our orchestration layer also helps us tune how we're getting those responses, right? Acts as the person logged in with the same access rules and security. I'm hammering home security because I think that's just a huge piece in terms of having an enterprise grade solution, which Prism is, right? We're not training on customer intellectual property. I'm hammering that one home too. I know I said it before, but these are very key takeaways and why I like to dwell on this slide a little bit, right? We may train on customer questions without any intellectual property or customer information or any of that. So really the metadata is what kind of helps us tune it. And you'll kind of see things like a thumbs up, thumbs down button that exists inside of Prism. That helps us as much as it helps you as well. And it's secured as well. All of this is happening inside of that same background SaaS infrastructure that we've already utilized in our partnerships with Microsoft and Azure and how we're deploying things. So we've kept it in that industry standard format. Right. And we also invite user feedback for how to improve this. And I think that's a good call out, which really it didn't have anything to do with some of that tech stack that I was just showing. But I can tell you from personal experience that I'm on calls every single week in front of customers, right, with development teams. And we're actually putting people together in that sense, teams of developers, right, and customers. That normally is not something that most companies will go out and try to facilitate interactions for, so that we can get that feedback and be able to iterate Prism very quickly, which is, in my opinion, yet another feature is that iteration cycle. Prism is not something that gets updated, once every 6 months and you hope that there's something there that's new and better for you. Because of the way we deliver it in that SaaS model, we're actually able to deliver those improvements very rapidly as we create them, test them, and push them out to the Prism platform. All right, let's get into a live demo. So I know I've had my screen up here. I'll turn my camera back on after we do the demo. But let's get into some software, folks. I think that's where we always like to go on these types of things. And surprise, surprise, we're in the Epicor ERP. So where am I going to go for Prism? Well, you'll notice on the left-hand side of my screen here, I have the Prism icon. So when you have Prism enabled, it's going to be right there. The consumer grade experience, again, I say that in very particular nature, it is actually a good thing. Boom, we have a chat window. We can add attachments, images. We could take a picture. If our device has a camera, we're on a device with a camera. And we can even use voice to text input into Prism, which if I wasn't on a webinar and I was doing this on a stage, and I certainly have, I have done these demos actually only by speaking, which I find kind of fun and efficient as just a way to ask those types of questions. So I'm going to go ahead and type in a question here, and we'll go through a couple examples, and I'll start breaking things down. I need a list of all material required for firm and release jobs that are past their due date. All right. And as expected, I hit the enter key. Prism is now thinking about, the answer and preparing to return data for me. And ultimately, Prism will return a result. And there we go. We've got all the jobs that are not firm and not closed with their due dates before October 14th. And you'll notice it's showing me what those parts are. Now, the interesting thing about LLMs, and I'll call this out because I always get this too, is like, well, Connor, it'd be nice if it had the job number. Please include the job number in those results. And I have a few other examples prepped where I do like to remind people, and you've probably noticed this when you've played with consumer grade solutions, even, is LLMs, right? They're interpreting your inputs, okay? Which means that the more specificity that you provide, the better the output or the response is going to be. So I could ask it to include that information. Please include the due date in those results, right? And be able to iterate through those responses if I want to. And so now I've got a full list. Well, guess what? I like to tell people this, and it's kind of, I do this on purpose a little bit, is if I would have just said, I need this, all these release jobs that are past their due date, include the job number and the due date in those results, I would have actually ended up with just this. So that's just a little prompt help, because I know some people are already playing with this, are going to pick up Prism. Just a helpful tidbit there. But let's break down some of these responses real quick, and we'll jump into some other cool examples. There's an information button. So if you remember when I was breaking down that orchestration layer, and that's kind of why I do it, is I want to tie this together now into those concepts that I was describing. It is literally telling me what tool essentially it was using in the background to return those results. This isn't made up data. It's saying, well, there's a BAQ, a system BAQ, even a user created BAQ that exists for this. We just need to display the types of information that they've asked me to display, filtered and sorted in the way that they've asked me to sort it. And it's actually breaking down how it's gone and done that. But some other useful features here are I can copy this result if I want to, and I could also export this result out to Excel. You can also help us by submitting thumbs up or thumbs down on these requests for metadata that's used in the improvement of Prism. And I assure you, throughout the last, I think, 6, 8, 10 months or so that Prism's actually been out in the wild, I have seen massive improvements in question answer responses based on people already out in the wild who have Prism using this, as well as those customer and developer interactions that we also have in the feedback that we gather to rapidly iterate through this. So let me change a direction. We kind of asked about manufacturing, and so people don't have to watch me type. I'll go ahead and actually just copy and paste a prompt in here. Create a balance sheet. Now, I said 2015. That's because in my demo system, that's where I know a good set of data to look at. But in your systems, this would certainly be, could be today's date for that matter. Now, I find this interesting too, because a lot of the times we don't want to run an entire financial report just to get some quick insights. So it'd be a handy thing to be able to ask Prism those types of questions as well. And what is nice about this is you'll see that balance sheet actually brought in account level data for me, opening balances, debits, credits, etc. Right? I could, if I want to, even iterate through that request if I so chose, right? Give me a breakdown by account number, maybe include the GL account with description in a BAQ format. Why don't we ask it again? And this is, I think, kind of important, is that when you get one response, you don't necessarily know what are all the questions you might want to ask about things. So iteration is important. Once you get an initial answer, you're probably going to think to yourself, well, now I need to ask this question, right? Now I need to ask that question. Now I want to look at those accounts, their descriptions, and those actual balances, break that down, and maybe even export that out to Excel. So I'll go ahead and clean this view. We'll come back here in a second for some other cool questions, but I think it's also worth noting, right? That's probably the first place that we're going to go. But Prism is also embedded throughout other areas of the system. So you'll notice when I go into quotes, right? I could be going into quotes, orders, I could be going into invoices, anywhere where we have these master list of items, whether it's invoices, parts, etc. These are big screens full of a lot of information. And there's a lot of exposed information that we could certainly use things like the traditional sorting and filtering, right, criteria that we're used to. But I got to tell you, even though we have the great feature in terms of personalization where we could, add more information to these screens to filter against, I think it's just way easier to hit the little prism icon here and say, for example, on quotes, show me all quotes with a confidence greater than 70. So now we have another way of working with the data that's right in front of us to get to the information that we need faster. Like, can you imagine, this is how I think about it, why I like this prompt, even though it seems like a very simple one. You could say, well, I could go to my, CRM dashboard and do that. You certainly could. But if I do this, guess what? I may not have had that confidence exposed on here. So I saved myself a bunch of clicks just by asking it to sort by confidence. And then when I go into the actual quote itself, right, I also now have the added benefit of having all of those filtered results right here for me to work through. I'm not throwing any shade necessarily on what a good CRM dashboard can do, but I certainly like the fact that I can dynamically apply that filter and now be able to work through those results with those, in this case, high confidence. Or maybe you're looking for low confidence on quotes, right? To be able to see what is it that we can do to actually make the sale. So I thought I'd bring that one up as just another, helpful tidbit for working through here. But if we come back, there's other agents that are also available to us. I already mentioned the fact that we can do attachments. So let me bring this one in. You can see I've got kind of a before and after of a burnt up part here, right? Our customer, they sent this to us. So what might we ask? Okay, well, our customer sent this before and after picture of this catalytic structure, and I'll give it some reference that those openings are 2 millimeter. Why not give it information? They use this in a petrochemical plant, and it's fouled quickly. What could we do to improve the product? So now there's even the capability to get those general question and answer type things and inside of Prism in a protected enterprise grade solution with Prism. And I find these to actually be very nice. If I'm not an engineer and I'm a customer service person, maybe trying to figure out what other products I have might meet some of these criteria to see if we already have it and can just sell it to them. Or maybe I'm going to use this information to spin up a quote, right, for something with some of those improvements, or I now have information to ask engineering about that's a little bit more intelligent than maybe what my initial understanding of what this situation actually implied. I also, kind of do this too, and I'll talk about this more at the end of the demo, but I have a real penchant for liking to go over to my Grow dashboard, which, by the way, BI is still a very important solution, information right in front of you. You didn't have to ask, but guess what? I'll enhance my own experience with this right now by grabbing a screenshot of this customer dashboard. I'm just hitting copy right now, and I can actually paste that in, okay? And then I can say, for example, let's analyze my sales dashboard and help give me some areas of concern and areas of opportunity. I like this because as much as BI is good, sometimes we lose, we use the phrase, missing the forest through the trees. Well, sometimes we miss the trees through the forest as well. That's what happens when you look at very large data sets in big dashboards that are very holistic. This gives me a couple things, like your average conversion rate is 64%, which is below your target, right? Your days to convert is pretty high. And then you've got some high value deals in that pipe, right? You've got some hot customers. What are they? You've got these high performing reps. Maybe I need to give them a high five today and ask them how they're doing it, right? And help the team maybe improve their conversion rates as well. Well, guess what? I thought this would be fun. I have this great production efficiency dashboard, which if anyone's ever kind of run production efficiency reports, I certainly like BI views better for that, where I can understand, right, at a global level. Well, I just happened to actually do a screen grab of that as well, that I'll go ahead and pull in here, which you can see I could do the same exact thing, right, whether it's through copy paste or as an attachment, and say, give me some insights again. Am I missing the trees through the forest, if you will, against this very, big dashboard full of data, so much data that I can't actually read the whole thing in one screen. So these are very, quick and helpful ways for me to begin getting insights into the system. I'm also going to change gears again here. So let me kind of move away from some of those ad hoc requests or being able to filter those big lists like on quotes, the financial questions. Something else that I really like with Prism, and I think a lot of folks can take advantage of, is yes, we certainly do have some very good help and support topics, right, in Epicor education available in the system. But I kind of, personally, I'm a little bit of a TLDR guy. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of too long didn't read, right? If I could just have something help me sort through that to understand, right, a question I might have about the system, that would be really helpful. And so there's actually a knowledge agent. So if I were to ask questions about how to do something or how to accomplish something inside of the ERP, I can certainly ask those questions and I'll get answers based on Prism's knowledge of the help and support articles that we've trained it on. But I like to go a little bit further and be more specific. You'll notice I kind of use that over and over. I want to create, in this case, I'm going to have sort of a business question. I want to create a business activity query that brings together the customer order number, ship by date, need by date, and also makes the ship by date updatable. Please guide me step by step on how to do this. What I like about this particular example, and I have many, many examples of doing this, and if I'm being fully transparent with you folks, when I prepare for demos or I'm doing research on how to accomplish things, I have been leaning on this a lot more lately. I used to lean on the help, but I lean on this because I'm always trying to solve problems. And I like the fact that I can give it sort of the business ask. I don't just want to know how to create a BAQ. I want to know how to create a BAQ, that can actually do something for me, right? Long term, and create a dashboard or a view. And guess what? You could have that be exposed to Prism as well, so that you could then ad hoc ask questions about it. But notice it tells you step by step how to walk through and accomplish those types of tasks. And because I put some of that business question context in there with it, it's merged that into the answer. I am actually one of the worst BAQ writers probably in history. And this to me is very helpful because it's called out, right, the actual table field names that I might need to make sure I know or bring in. And it makes it much easier in the BAQ builder to just do a search for order head, right? Not knowing that we didn't have the A in there for order HEAD, right? This now I don't need to know that context as a person because Prism is able to pick up with that. But you could certainly just be curious about advanced functionality as well, even if there's not necessarily a true business case for it. And so I always like to give people just an example of if you use advanced unit of measure, you know that this is a very heady topic, right? There's a lot of information that's required to know on how to set this up. Even though it's very, very useful, right? It would be good to get some sort of understanding, right, on those things across all the different help and support articles. And oh, guess what? Just like before, it is citing itself, but it's also giving me links out in the answers to these questions to those exact articles. You can actually see the link right there at the bottom of the screen when I hover over those. So that can be very helpful. Now, I'm going to move on just for a second here. ECM. I know there's a lot of people out there using Epicor Content Management. Wouldn't it be nice, though, if we could ask questions about the documents that we have in there? Well, I've got this Dolphin distribution terms document, and I'm kind of describing what I've already had happen. Is you notice, and I say show here, document text, we now have Prism as an agent, an ECM agent, enabled in ECM. And what it's doing is it's actually extracting the text of this document, which is important so that when we ask questions about it, Prism knows also how to respond to it. So I just like to call that out, that now that is running in the background. I didn't actually have to do anything because I got Prism ECM agent set up over here. And I could begin asking questions about that particular document. Now, we all know because I just showed it, but maybe I want to know, have a Dolphin distribution terms document. Do we want to know if this document even exists in ECM? Maybe we're waiting for it to be received. Maybe we're waiting for a particular invoice. That could be a neat way to just do an ad hoc query without doing all the click-throughs to search for it, right? Well, we can also then ask bigger questions about it. Does the Dolphin distribution terms document say anything about the engineering match process? That's because I happen to know that this is a vendor I buy things from, and sometimes we need equivalent parts, and we have some terms around that, but I forgot what that process actually kind of is or what those terms are. And because it's contained in that document, and I've asked a question about it, it's gone ahead and given me sort of that summary. But if you'll notice between these ECM examples that I have here, that it cites itself again, and I could actually be taken straight into Epicor Content Management to go and review that document for myself. Now, finally, if I really wanted to, I could say, hey, can you summarize the Dolphin distribution terms document? I could just get that summary level information. Again, I'm using one document here, but if I loaded in several of them, that could be like, tell me about what the user manual says for the Husky 500. Does it mention anything about oil change interval? So I find that to be a really powerful way of accessing information that sometimes feels locked away inside of the task of having to read, right, manually. I guess now we call reading a manual task, and Prism can assist us with that, with just prompting in much shorter questions. Now, there's several other agents, and I'll show what that is after the demo here, but there is one last thing that I do want to show before we jump back into the slides and wrap up into questions, which is not necessarily a user-facing, per se, type of functionality. Although this is great, I think, for especially existing Epicor customers who are familiar with us, right? We also use Prism in ways as a tool for ourselves, right? To assist you folks, to assist in migrations. So I've actually gone over to my cloud analyzer for my demo environment that I have, but that's my ERP. And you'll notice the Prism symbol is all throughout this entire thing. And when I look at these various cards, I'm looking in this case at dashboards. You folks might find this helpful too, right? With an analyzer run. What I've found in my past is a lot of the times we add BAQs, we add dashboards, we make different functions, and we get the ERP set up to work the way we want it to, right? And the person who maybe made some of those things, that was 15 years ago. And we don't understand what they do completely unless we actually jumped into those functions and manually ourselves tried to establish what they're actually being used for. And so for us, we've got these helpful summaries by Prism inside our analyzer that actually tells us what this dashboard is used for, right? Allocation by specific order, right? Provides a comprehensive view of the order allocations. If I go a little bit further to the updatable BAQs, right, where it has the ability to, it's going to go ahead and give me that summary level information for those BAQs. User interface customizations. What does it do? What does it affect? Right? This kind of helps us determine, do we still need to use this? Now I know what it's for, or maybe someone gets a report based on something, but we weren't 100% clear where it came from. Well, we might be able to find it pretty quick when we have all these summaries of all these different things from inside of the system. So just another very assistive tool that we now have at our disposal. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch back here to my slideshow, and I'll get my camera on for you folks in a second. But when I talked about those different agents, right, and I asked all those different questions, I kind of want to connect some dots here. Multimodal, right? We did ask questions about images and parts. We wanted a chart. If we wanted to, we analyzed it, right? We have that knowledge agent where we ask those questions, the filter agent when we filtered, by quote confidence, because maybe we're investigating what sales we could potentially make, right? The list query, right, where we're getting lists that kind of look like BAQs in that Prism interface back. The metrics, right? I could have asked other questions, around metrics. Go back here. Apologies. But I also like to call out too, this is coming soon because Connor needs to update his slides, but we just saw it in action and this has been released, the ECM agent asking questions about documents. And not a quiz, but a show of hands that I can't see. Does everyone kind of realize now that you don't have to memorize these agents either to be able to invoke their functionality through Prism? So a couple other things, in terms of future state coming up on the roadmap is things that we're looking into actually releasing as additional agents like auto tuning. Big question we get around like, how can we make MRP work better? Well, we all know that probably starts with planning parameters. How can we ask questions around that and get answers to really tune things up? Regulatory and compliance. RFQ management, a very transactional, click heavy type of operation where we're usually answering a lot of emails. This has actually been released as well and helps us automatically track and manage those RFQs, quality, and even image searching throughout the ERP would be nice. Now, when you notice that I did those examples though, where I may have gone into grow, right? This kind of gives me an opportunity to say, well, I'm sure somebody here had the question, Connor, why did you copy and paste a screenshot of a grow dashboard into Prism? One, because it works and it's helpful, right? But two, because it gives me the excuse to also mention that Grow Data Platform is on the horizon for release in the first part of 2026 here. So that's not very far away. And why is that important? Because I'm sure the follow-up to that whole grow question I just kind of rhetorically put out there is, why can't I just ask those questions about the data that you have in there? And the answer to that is, you will be able to in the future. And so what we're seeing here is what, as an example demo system even, what all the different relations between all of our data looks like. It's a lot to sift through, right? And so Grow Data Platform is the concept of how we're going to be able to, in the future, create pipelines, not just from ERP data, but from any data source that you hook up into that Grow ecosystem, how we can bring that data into view of Prism, right? And be able to ask questions about it and be able to get insights and answers. So keep your eye out for things like Grow Data Platform. Now, I appreciate, I'll skip through these things here. Everyone following along with me. few key points and we'll open up to questions for me or Bob. But automation, business intelligence, adjacency, impact, right? Why use Prism? Another common question that I get. Me personally, I find it empowering, right? And how do I find it empowering? Automation, though, increases the ability to automate tasks and leverage intelligent workflows and AI-enabled tool sets. And that's where things like RFQs, right? You're not building manual workflows to do that. You're using the Prism agent in automation to assist you with what were normally very click heavy, transaction heavy, conversation heavy type tasks. Business intelligence, right? ERP and Grow platform, they're going to be the living substrate, of your business data, but we're charging those up with AI solutions so that you can now tap them with natural language. Okay, adjacency. I like to bring this concept up. When I put in that question about making a BAQ, and it tells me literally how to do it within the context of that business question, where I could have produced, if we all had a little more time together, a dashboard that showed me those things. I think a very adjacent and very positive result of AI and putting it in people's hands is it can lead to durable outcomes. And I kind of define durable outcomes as it helped me figure out how to do something in the system that has a lasting impact on my business. It helped me produce a dashboard, right, that has lasting usefulness for my business. RFQ agent, being able to read documents, all of those types of things. And finally, the impact. AI-enabled employees, right? They have increased access to information. If anyone's ever talked to me before, they'll know that that's like my number one thing. Even before I worked at Epicor, is I just want access to information to be as easy as possible. And I think when you do that, you increase decision velocity and operational independence so that people can get more done faster. So with that, we'll hang out on this slide here, and we'll open up the last 6 minutes or so here for any questions that we want to handle.
Connor, great job. Thank you. We do have a couple of questions that one is for yourself. So as a manufacturer, they're new to AI. With your experience, what would you recommend? How would we start our AI journey?
Well, I think some degree answered by, right, this presentation. That's by using enterprise grade solutions. And because Prism is made by Epicor and it is part of our technology stack now, that is going to be the fastest path towards having a real AI, useful AI solution, right, integrated in your environment that handles things all the way from the security aspects, but also is aware, right, of all the different features and functionality and nuances of your business and how you're set up in using Epicor.
Very good, thank you. And another question. Currently, Prism is available for non-gov customers. When will it be available in the Gov Cloud? And I can start that if you'd like, Connor.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob. I'm not 100% on the date for that yet, so if I
so it's actually a tad bit of a complex question. So the first part of the question is, in order to be a SaaS solution for our gov or defense contractors, the application must be FedRAMP certified, either moderate or high. And Epicor has committed to a FedRAMP journey, so they have begun. Most of the work will get done in this fiscal year, 2026. And then after that, it really is up to the federal government and Department of State and Defense as to when they grant the FedRAMP status. Once that happens, the entire Kinetic family will be in the FedRAMP environment, and it will be available in the GovCloud FedRAMP Moderate. So that's the good news. We're on a time clock. Unfortunately, we don't get to control that time clock. So my gut says that sometime in 2026, late 2026, will be when we will be looking at having a real solution that our defense and gov customers can leverage.
Excellent.
And with that, I do not see any other questions. So I would like to conclude and thank everyone for their time, their participation in learning and understanding how the Prism platform can help your organization. Feel free to reach out to the team at Creative. We're knowledgeable and we're more than delighted to engage with you in your organization and experience how Prism can benefit your organization. Connor, thank you very much for the rich content. And as usual, we look forward to seeing you again at our next Epicor event and or one of our future webinars that are coming up almost bi-weekly. So with that, everyone have a wonderful day. And this will conclude our event for today.